What happens when the ultimate victim of a brutal 100-year war becomes, well, the exact same monster he swore to destroy?
It's a terrifying question, really.
It is, because today we are looking at that incredibly thin line between righteous rebellion and honestly just mass murder.
Right.
So welcome back to the deep dive. And we're skipping the surface level under today because we know that you, the listener, you're here for the real mechanic, the narrative.
Exactly. You've watched the media, you know the lore.
You know the basic.
Right. But you want to know the psychological scaffolding that's actually holding it all up.
And that is exactly what our source material provides today.
Yeah, we're looking at a huge stack of incredibly rigorous character analyses focused entirely on the world of Avatar, The Last Airbender.
But just to be clear, we aren't here to just recap the plot for you.
No, not at all. We are using these texts as a lens.
Yeah.
A way to examine the sociology of systemic trauma.
Right.
We're going to deconstruct the anatomy of narcissistic abuse, the psychological frameworks of authoritarianism.
Which is heavy stuff.
It is. And the very specific, almost agonizing cognitive mechanisms required to redirect generational trauma instead of just blindly absorbing it.
The way I've been kind of organizing this in my mind, based on this, is like studying the anatomy of a historical conflict.
Okay, yeah.
Like when you look at any major geopolitical upheaval, you don't just have one unified experience of trauma.
No, it's fractal.
Exactly. You have distinct archetypes. You have the dictator who orchestrates all the suffering from this like sterile, insulated throne room.
Right.
You have the privileged defector born right into the oppressing class who has to violently untangle their own complicity.
Yeah.
And then you have the grassroots guerrilla fighter, the victim on the ground whose trauma just completely metastasizes into extremism.
And we're going to put the psychology of all three of those archetypes under the microscope today.
It's such a perfect analytical framework.
It really is. But to truly understand the psychological wreckage of the survivors, so the defector and the guerrilla fighter, we cannot start with.
No. We have to start at the absolute epicenter of the trauma.
Exactly. We have to analyze the architecture of the oppressor, Fire Lord Ozai.
Okay, let's unpack this right out of the gate, because I want to push back on this a little.
Sure.
One of the first things the sources emphasize is that Ozai is a purely irredeemable character.
He is.
And honestly, that goes against everything modern storytelling tells us, good writing.
Right, it's out of fashion.
Exactly. If you look at media over the last 2 decades, every single villain gets a sympathetic backstory. They were bullied, or they have this noble goal but a flawed methodology, or, I don't know, they're just misunderstood.
Yeah, we're basically trained to call a static, purely evil villain lazy writing.
We are. So why do the sources argue that Ozai's total lack of redemption is actually brilliant?
Well, because treating him as a misunderstood victim would fundamentally break the philosophical engine of the story.
How so?
The sources argue that his irredeemability isn't a flaw in the writing. It is a vital narrative utility.
Narrative that.
Right. He doesn't exist for us to psychoanalyze his inner child or to pity him. He exists as a monolithic, unmoving wall that the protagonist's ideology has to crash.
Oh,
Think about Aang. He's an air nomad raised in strict deontology.
right. The ethical framework that says certain actions like taking a human life are just universally wrong, regardless of the consequences.
Precisely. Aang believes all life is sacred. There is no greater good exception to murder in his culture.
Right.
So if Ozai were a sympathetic, reasonable villain with some tragic misunderstanding, Aang could just talk him down.
They could just hash it out over...
Exactly. And then Aang's pacifism wouldn't actually be tested.
Wow, okay.
By making Ozai a manifestation of pure, unadulterated malevolence, the narrative forces Aang into this agonizing moral corner.
Because the tension isn't about whether Aang can physically defeat him.
No, it's about whether Aang will have to sacrifice his own deontological ethic. Will he have to commit an act he views as spiritually corrupting to save the world?
Ozai's pure evil is the ultimate stress test for Aang's morality.
Exactly.
That reframes it completely for me. If the villain bends, the hero's morals don't have to.
Right.
But if the villain is an immovable object, the hero's pacifism is suddenly a massive liability.
It becomes the central conflict of the entire finale.
But wait, there is a detail in the source material that seems to contradict this whole idea of him being an immovable supernatural monster.
Oh, the baby picture.
Yes. The series briefly flashes an image of Ozai as this innocent baby playing in. When I first read that, my immediate thought was, aha, they are trying to make us feel sorry. They're sneaking in the sympathetic back.
It's a very common misinterpretation, honestly.
Yeah.
But the analysis completely rejects that view.
Really?
Yeah. That image of the baby isn't a plea for sympathy. It's actually a much darker sociological statement.
Okay, explain that.
It's a stark reminder that systemic evil is not a supernatural entity. It isn't a demon born with literal fire in its veins. Evil is a human disease.
Oh, wow.
That baby was entirely in a total blank slate, but he was born into a hyper-militaristic imperialist echo chamber.
And the sources dive into his family dynamic to explain it.
They do.
His father, Athlon, favored Ozai's older brother. And instead of creating just a standard run-of-the-mill sibling rivalry, this environment of conditional worth bred a deeply toxic ambition.
Because in an authoritarian imperialist culture, your worth is inextricably linked to power and dominance.
You're only as good as what you can conquer.
Exact. The sources use this to map out the psychology of generational trauma. Ozai wasn't infected by some magic spell. He was infected by a family system that equated empathy with weakness and ruthlessness with value.
It's a psychological disease.
Yes, one that festered until he viewed literally every human being, including his own family, strictly as instruments for his own advancement.
And the ruthlessness is staggering. The way the sources detail his climb to power. I mean, he literally weaponized marriage.
He does.
He uses his wife, Ursa, forcing her to orchestrate the assassination of his own father just so he can bypass his brother and steal the throne.
It's incredibly dark.
And then he banishes her. He completely detonates his own family unit without a single second of hesitation because, to a narcissist, family members aren't people, they're just chess.
That is the exact clinical definition of narcissistic personality disorder, but playing out on a geopolitical scale.
Right.
Other human beings are merely extensions of the self.
Yeah.
They only exist to serve the narcissist's ego.
Which makes the poetry of his ultimate defeat so deeply satisfying. Because Aang doesn't kill him.
No.
Aang strips him of his firebending, leaving him completely powerless, rotting in a mundane prison cell. The man who crowned himself the Phoenix King, the supreme ruler of the universe, he can't even light his own jail cell.
It is a profound thematic resolution.
It really is.
Because if Aang had killed Ozai, he would have essentially operated within Ozai's own philosophical framework.
The idea that...
Exact. The idea that whoever has the power to inflict lethal violence gets to rule. By taking away his bending, Aang dismantles the ideology itself. And for a clinical narcissist whose entire identity is predicated on dominance, the removal of power is a catastrophic psychological injury.
It's worse than death.
Significantly worse. It forces him to live in a reality where he is completely irrelevant.
It's the ultimate humiliation. But I want to pivot here because while Ozai's macro-level war on the world is fascinating, the sources spend a massive amount of time on his micro-level war.
His family.
Yes. His toxic ideology didn't just ruin the geopolitical landscape, it systematically destroyed his own children.
What's fascinating here is that the grand irony of his story is that by treating his children as tools, he engineered the exact mechanisms of his own downfall.
The family unit is where the psychology of this universe is just so intensely concentrated. We have to look at the dichotomy between his two children, starting with his daughter, Azia. The sources highlight this brutal quote from Ozai that sets up this dynamic. He says, Azula was born lucky, Zuko was luck-born.
Which is just horrific parenting.
It's awful. But when I was thinking about Azula's so-called luck, I couldn't help but think of real-world child stars.
Oh, that's an interesting comparison.
You know the ones. The kids managed by completely ruthless stage parents from hell.
Oh, absolutely.
The child is given all the spotlight, the best clothes, the adulation, but the moment the cameras turn off, the affection just disappears unless they hit